Hello and welcome back to the Start a Glamping Business podcast. Today, I know we say this every week that we've got a special guest, but we really do have a special guest this week. Ben Wolff. He is the co-founder and developer of a company called Onera. They're a landscape resort, but they're a landscape resort in Fredericksburg, Texas. But they've also got big plans for the future, as we can probably get into a little bit today. Ben is is the most sophisticated operator I've come across in the glamping business, although we're going to get into a bit why we don't use the term glamping when we're talking about Onera, and we're going to get into his processes, what he's doing and how he's able to charge such a high nightly rate. Ben's got the highest nightly rate of anyone we've interviewed on the podcast, and there's a lot of reasons as to why that is, so we'll get into that a little bit as well today. But first of all, Ben, welcome. Thank you for coming on. Really appreciate it. Could you just give us a little bit of an introduction to Onera, the Fredericksburg site, what the units are, how many you've got, and how much you generally charge per night?
Sure. Yeah, thanks for having me on, Nick. Really appreciate it. So Onera Fredericksburg is currently 11 units. It is in Texas Hill Country, wine country. One of the beautiful things about the site is that it's only a half mile from Main Street, and Main Street Fredericksburg is one of the top driving destinations in Central Texas. Very charming, a lot of boutiques, antique type places, wine tasting shops. And we found this beautiful, almost seemingly untouched piece of land and a few lots next to each other. So you're only half a mile from Main Street, but you really feel like you're in this enchanted forest. And there's a main creek that runs through all of Fredericksburg called Barron's Creek, which runs along the side of our property as well. We have 11 units currently. We're expanding, actually building 23 more on the property next door. Should be opening those towards the end of 2024. And we have a very bespoke set of units. This was our first development. There was almost an element of like, hey, let's try some things. Let's test some things out, see what works the best from a price point, from an operational point, building them, how efficient we can be with that. So we have multiple bespoke tree houses. So we have the Spyglass treehouse, the Monarch treehouse. Those are probably our highest end units, along with Live Oak Lodge, which is a large 2-bedroom container home unit with a massive rooftop deck and a plunge pool, hot tub, really nestled into the woods. So that's one of our higher performing units as well. We have a double peaked safari tent called Sage Safari. That's one of our bigger units, also does quite well. And then we have a cocoon shaped tent. We have a more of a typical safari style tent, 1-bedroom unit. And we have a number of smaller 1-bedroom container homes as well.
Yeah, and how much do you charge per night roughly? Obviously, it varies across units.
It's a really tough question, right? So I would say it ranges anywhere from low 200s, midweek, kind of low season, to 1,500, 1,800 a night on some of the highest demand weekend days, particularly Saturdays is kind of our highest demand day.
And I think, everyone who's listening, their ears will have pricked up and they want to know the secret to being able to charge that much. And we'll get into that a little bit. But just, so people can get a picture of the units that we're talking about. You use the term one of one, and they're really completely unique units. I'm hoping our editor, if you're watching on YouTube, our editor will have put some pictures up of the units as you're watching. If you are listening, then we'll put the link to Onera's website in the description, so you can go out and check what they look like. But they really are unique, and you can start to see why Ben is able to charge the rates that he does. Now we've got a picture of what the resort looks like. I use the term resort. We've kind of danced around the term glamping. We had a call yesterday where we discussed the terminology you used to describe your site, and part of the reason I think you're able to charge these nightly rates is because of how you kind of present yourself to high net worth individuals, wealthy people who are obviously going to be the ones capable of paying these high nightly rates. So do you want to just give a little bit of a discussion as to why you don't tend to use the word glamping for Onera?
Yeah, sure. And it's part of how the concept for Onera came about. So I think there's a ton of inventory in the space and growing inventory of this kind of mid-tier products. Right, a canvas tent, maybe no temperature control, no major private amenities to speak of. A lot of the major brands in the glamping space, Under Canvas, auto camp, and getaway is kind of probably the most utilitarian value product of them all. But they're all mid-tier, right? They're not high end, they're not super luxury. And then you get into this super luxury landscape resort like Amangiri, Post Ranch Inn, Ambiente is a new one in Sedona. So you do have that, sort of very high end. And we think of ourselves as, very high end as well, kind of between an under canvas and an Aman, Aman light, if you will. And we really think of glamping as this mid-tier product, even, sometimes more of a value product. And what we're providing with Onera has tons of amenities, all the comforts of home and more, private hot tub, kitchenette. Some of them are tented, most of them are hard-sided now, very unique, high design type units. And we just think that's a different category. And when people think about glamping, it's kind of that more mid-tier product. You're still roughing it a little bit, and you're not at all roughing it at Onera. And we don't want people to think that.
Yeah, and so that's something to bear in mind. A lot of the people listening to this episode will still want to go ahead with the canvas tents, safari tents, etc. And you can, as Auto Camp, Under Canvas, etc. show, you can get a really nice nightly rate from that. But if you are looking to do these kind of one-of-one locations, anyone listening, it might be worth considering the kind of the category that you put yourselves in, and how that might affect the daily rates that you're able to charge.
With that said, I just do want to mention that as much as I didn't want to think of Onera as a glamping resort and more of a landscape hotel, we've come up in Travel and Leisure's top glamping spots in Texas, and tons of writers and bloggers and influencers refer to us as glamping. And we don't push super hard against that because glamping has an audience, right? It's just when we speak about ourselves, we try to really put it in that landscape hotel bucket.
And we're going to get into, why I think Onera is such a superbly run business, really. There's a whole lot that's going on behind the scenes that makes it just brilliant, really. But to give a bit of colour and maybe some preamble to that, you've got an interesting background. You're a successful guy before you started Onera, although I think this one's probably going to take you to another level. But could you just tell us a little bit about yourself, your backstory, and how you ended up starting Onera?
Yeah, happy to. My career has taken a lot of twists and turns. I've done a lot of different things. I think you saw I worked at McKinsey straight out of school, did that for a couple of years. There's some things from that I still implement and use today in my current business. Went from McKinsey to was actually doing some sort of lifestyle and events type work in New York City, which was a blast. Had a good time for a few years there. Ended up actually linking up with Jesse a few years after McKinsey, and he was doing one of the first Airbnb management companies that I knew of. It was mostly urban rentals, a lot of lease arbitrage, right? We would lease apartments and then, sublease them before the cities were really cracking down. So I was doing business development for his business at that time, and had one or two units myself that company managed. Okay. And from there, I went on to do some software sales, did a little bit of a departure, but I was always interested in this hospitality and short-term rental management world. So I started to build a portfolio on the side that management company that Jesse had started, Sensei, was really managing and doing the ground operations for. And there came a point where we had enough units that it started to make sense for me to potentially basically take over the operations and really build an operating business as well to manage these units. So I also had people asking me to manage units for them as well. So I had my own portfolio, but then I also had people like, hey, how do I get in on this? How do I, build up a portfolio, potentially have you guys manage it? So I ended up leaving my software sales job because I was making more money and it was easier to do this whole short-term rental thing that I was doing. So we built the portfolio we had like 8 units when I left my job to 200 units under management by the end of 2019. Right around there is when COVID hit, right? Early 2020, most of our units were urban. So that business really got hammered during COVID. And that's around the time that I really started getting pushed in this direction of one-of-one, alternative accommodations, glamping. Jesse was already doing actually some of this stuff in Joshua Tree. We had not, again, partnered up yet. but I was in the process of raising a real estate fund for alternative hospitality and really got pushed in this direction of doing more glamping and kind of landscape focused properties, partially because I had this amazing RV road trip with my wife for our honeymoon. We got married in fall of 2019, just fell in love with the great outdoors, did not fall in love with all the headaches I had to deal with the RV. So wanted to provide an upscale experience that removed any of that friction associated with spending time in the great outdoors, right? So all the comforts of home, high end luxury, but still, being able to connect with wildlife and nature.
And going back to the start of your career, you mentioned you worked at McKinsey for a couple of years. For those who don't know, McKinsey is the biggest consultancy in the world, bar none, I would say. I think that's correct. And
I think they're the most prestigious. I don't know if they're
there you go.
Some of the other ones like Deloitte and some are quite large.
Yeah, but the most prestigious, let's say that. And they're kind of a talent factory. You have to be sharp as anything to get in the first place. Obviously highly competitive graduate roles, and those kind of places, they train you to think in certain ways and solve problems in certain ways. So I'd be interested to know, that there's probably not many. I imagine you're the only kind of McKinsey graduate in this industry. What kind of principles and ways of thinking did you pick up from that role that you've since applied to your career, but particularly at Onera?
So I think the frameworks around problem solving are very applicable to anything that you do post McKinsey, and that's certainly been helpful. There's some specific elements of projects I had at McKinsey that I incorporate into my life, my professional career thereafter, and my business today. One of the biggest ones was outsourcing. One of my biggest, longest projects at McKinsey was working for a bank. I think it was based out of Pittsburgh, and we were helping them set up an offshore center and determining where it was going to be. We were looking at Malaysia, the Philippines, which ended up being the recommendation. And the Philippines really became this hotbed, up and coming call center location that had really high quality offshore agents, very minimal accent, very kind of amenable and friendly sounding. That they just kind of sound, their dialect or I guess I should say the accent is not short and choppy like some other dialects. So it comes off as much more like soothing and amenable for customer service. And our whole offshore team is Filipino. And I've, continued to hire over there. And my old company has a team of 20. My new company is a much smaller, more curated, group of properties that are all one of one. So we only have 5 kind of top folks from the Philippines that handle our customer service. But yeah, that was a big takeaway from McKinsey that started there. And certainly there's a benefit from a kind of credibility standpoint, right, of working at a blue chip firm like that and kind of getting that stamp of approval, if you will. So, that's helpful as well.
Yeah, and you mentioned the offshore sort of customer service centers. Again, a lot of the people that are looking to start these kind of glamping businesses, they may want to start something small and certainly not at the kind of stage where they'll need anything like that. But there will be a percentage of this audience that absolutely have got grand ambitions and want to go big. So how does an offshore call center work for a glamping business or landscape hotel? Is it the first point of contact, or is there other forms of automated points of contact for the guest? And how have you generally implemented that for the guest experience?
So we do have a guest communications team in the Philippines. We have some automated messages, but most of the messaging is, from an actual person in the Philippines, first point of defense. I have a local, onshore general manager who's helping oversee that team, and escalated issues will go to him. But we have SOPs. They have rules that they can follow, right, around certain amount of refunds they can just offer, certain amount of discounts they can just offer. They work hand in hand with our pricing team, right? Because a lot of guests are coming in asking for a discount. Speed to respond to somebody who's trying to book is super important in terms of getting bookings and maximizing revenue. So there's a lot of hand in hand between pricing and the guest communications team that's in the Philippines. In terms of how to build a team like that, it's certainly getting harder and harder. I'm not going to lie. When I started hiring over there 10 years ago, you could, the sort of cat wasn't out of the bag yet, right? I feel like a lot of people know about the Philippines as a great market to hire offshore talent. And at that time they didn't. So now there's a lot more competition to hire. So we've had some success with Upwork. I used to have a lot more success with Upwork. But more recently, we've actually been using Support Shepherd. And I was really struggling finding people on Upwork and decided, hey, I'm going to try this thing that I saw on, Nick Huber post about that he's involved in. And I'm again, not going to lie, we interviewed, they sent us 3 people initially, and we hired one. And we thought she was going to be fantastic, super well-spoken, really seemed like a go-getter, all of that. We hired her. And day one, she's having a conversation and starting to get trained up by my manager over there, Jen. And Jen told us that she was very particular about her hours and nothing that she had mentioned during the interview process. Like, it had come up, but she said, oh, don't worry, I'm flexible. And we need flexibility, right? I mean, sometimes they have to cover night shift, even if they work day shift. Obviously, the hours are pretty funky compared to the US. And it just seemed like it was all about her. So I've learned also in my career, hire slow, fire fast. So instead of this, sunk cost of, hey, we're going to, try to make it work with her because we invested so much time in interviewing her, let's just cut the cord. And to Support Shepherd's credit, they do offer, if you're not happy within the first 90 days, they'll waive their fee in order to find you somebody else. And they did that. And our second hire through them has been just amazing. Super, probably one of the best hires that we've made. And along those lines, I mentioned a little bit of our interview and hiring process, much more rigorous and robust as of the past year or two than it was before that. So, we do make prospective candidates jump through a reasonable amount of hoops. And at first I was afraid that folks wouldn't do that and we would lose a lot of candidates along the process. But what we found so far is that they're excited about what we're doing. They're excited about our products. And if they're really invested, they will put in the time. And there hasn't been the level of drop off that I thought. And we get a way better picture of the candidate, and we're way better at hiring than we used to be.
Yeah. And that policy of, offshore, support workers, that kind of blends into a wider policy that you have at Onera, as you're very employee light. The previous guest on the podcast, Connor Schwab, who, when this comes out, it'll probably be about a month ago. We were talking about how in the glamping industry there's a real spectrum between companies like Collective Retreats, who are very human touch, hands-on, giving you Michelin star level kind of food, versus the getaways who you have a cabin in a private area, and the idea is you don't see a single human throughout your whole stay, and it's just a complete escape. Now you're definitely towards the latter end of the spectrum. I know you incorporate experiences and things at the resort. But you are very employee light, and obviously that has benefits in terms of labour costs and profit margins and everything like that. So I'd be interested in knowing a little bit more about how you've implemented that principle, maybe areas where you are very employee light, whereas others might be employee heavy, and how you've generally found it, and how it's either added to or maintain the same level of guest experience as would be the case with a very human touch kind of policy.
Yeah. So I think there's something high level I want to speak to, and then can get more into the nuts and bolts of light staff model. Mm-hmm. So high level, we're trying to hire A players, right? I think that an A player is worth a couple of B and C players at minimum, right? So we're able to hire and operate with fewer people if we attract top talent, and then they want to stay with us because they're in an environment of top talent. Right. So I think that's something to consider, and I think something necessary in a limited staff model. You need the people that you do have to be really top notch, because there's not many of them. And that certainly holds true for us on the guest communication side. I think we pay more than most for our offshore Philippines team because we want the best of the best over there. And we need that for the rates that people are paying. Right? I think that, Kevin from Posh Outdoors, who well, said that he did a little test to reach out to our guest communications team essentially and see how the response was. And he was kind of blown away at how fast the response was and personal and all the rest. And that's because we really try to hire great people over there. So if you hire good offshore people that really provide a high level of customer service, even though it's virtual, then the guest will still feel well taken care of. And in today's day and age, most guests don't necessarily need to feel like they see anybody. And there's actually a benefit to not seeing staff, right? We have this whole idea of an enchanting escape, or like I was saying, this dream world and this fantasy world. And if you see our staff running around, it kind of almost takes you out of that bubble, right? It takes you out of that little private romantic bubble, hopefully, that we're creating for you and your loved one that you're sharing the experience with. So it's all part of that story and that vibe and that model. We do have one on-site person at Onera, and we have a backup sort of person if he's on vacation or needs breaks, things like that. And we have found that to be an absolute requirement at our price point. If somebody needs extra towels, coffee, something's not working, we need somebody who can be there within 10, 15 minutes at most, like a traditional hotel. But we don't need a check-in desk. We don't need a lobby, right? Nobody cares about that stuff. Just give me my code and let me get into my unit and start my, romantic escape. We have next to no issues with guests being able to figure out which unit is theirs and how to get in and all of that. We have very minimal problems with that. And any that we do, our offshore team can troubleshoot 85 to 90% of them. So,
Hi everyone, thanks for listening. This is just a quick note to say that this podcast is brought to you by Glamping North America. And what we do is we help you through the process of starting a glamping business no matter what stage you're at. So if you need to find a property, we'll tell you where the most suitable area is to start your glamping business. If you have a property, we'll look at your local zoning code and tell you how likely you are to get your project off the ground according to the zoning rules and regulations in your local area. We'll also give you a really good roadmap of permits that you'll need and regulations that you'll need to be aware of to get your glamping business off the ground. If you need financing, we'll introduce you to our range of financing partners and do you a feasibility study that will give you some really solid financial projections and market analysis that will allow you to acquire the funding that you need. If you need glamping units, we'll talk you through your options and introduce you to one of our trusted manufacturing partners to ensure that you're looked after throughout the whole process. If you need a site design or if you need permits to move forward with your project, we've got architects who will do all your drawings, make all your arguments, and essentially allow your dream to become a reality. The list goes on and I don't want to bore you, so I'll let you get back to the episode in a second. All I'd say is that Glamping North America are the people to speak to about starting a glamping business in the US or Canada. So if you're even thinking of starting a glamping business, just get in touch with us at contact@glamptech.com or 646-586-2330. All the details are in the description, and no matter what stage of the process you're at, we will be able to help, whether it's doing something ourselves or pointing you in the right direction of our partners. Just let us know that you came from the podcast and we'll see about doing you a little discount along the way. So thanks for listening, and I'll let you get back to the episode. One other thing that you're very, very good at is you experience a really high level of direct bookings. You don't rely on Airbnb or VRBO like a lot of other people in the industry do. Obviously, a big part of that is social media. Is that the main reason? What's your kind of marketing strategy to make sure that you get these really high percentage of direct bookings and obviously save yourself the commission and paying out commission to Airbnb and people like that?
Yeah, to date, it's been almost entirely driven through social media and really almost entirely through Instagram. We are broadening that strategy. So we are starting to do more with emailers and SEO, and there's other things that we're kind of getting into. We're considering TikTok. Obviously, we're pushing me on Twitter and LinkedIn and kind of building me as an authority, which has some peripheral benefits to Onera as well. So we're building out a lot of capabilities, but to date, it's largely been Instagram. And in the beginning, it was just kind of me messing around, not really knowing what I was doing, but we had cool enough units and good enough photos that we would have inbound interest from collaborators, influencers that wanted to stay. And that was really how we got going, and would highly recommend working with influencers and collaborators. You will need to learn over time which are the good ones, right? I mean, just because somebody has 1 million followers doesn't mean they're going to drive a ton of bookings to you. You want somebody that has a very engaged following with an audience that is going to be receptive and interested in actually booking your stay. So that's something that we found. And I've done it myself. I've worked with an agency, and have come to decide that social media is so valuable that we've really built out the capability internally. And we now have this robust team around social media because the ROI is so insanely high. And we offer this service actually to other unique stays as well. So in addition to revenue management, I think we talked about this. We also offer social media management, influencer collaboration, recruitment, coordination, and professional content creation. And that's kind of the trifecta of how we generate direct bookings. So we need our account managed and regularly posting. We need to engage with our community. We need to produce and post content that has the potential to go viral and really evoke emotion and feeling from a potential guest, inspire them to want to come stay with us. Because a guest that's inspired through Instagram and then goes to our direct booking website cares much less what the price is than somebody who's price shopping on Airbnb, right? They're way more price insensitive than an Airbnb shopper. Mm-hmm. And then the influencers and collaborators, they get you all the eyeballs, right? They get you the new audience in addition to your content that's hopefully getting reshared and reaching beyond your audience. The influencers and collaborators help you to reach a whole new audience that you didn't have before.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned revenue management about 30 seconds ago, because that's what I'm going to go on to next is, you're very good at social media. You've got amazing units, but I think one thing that is really outstanding about your business is and this is all coming from our call yesterday, so I've been fully sold on your revenue management abilities, and Jesse's, is you're very good at revenue management, basically. And a lot of people might not know what revenue management is. So first of all, if you could you please explain what revenue management is in relation to this kind of business? And then, you don't have to give away the secret sauce or go into huge detail, but what's your rough kind of strategy for revenue management as well?
So put simply, revenue management is maximizing revenue for a hospitality asset. And it doesn't even necessarily need to be a hospitality asset, but that's the world that we're in. And then a big piece of that is pricing strategy and optimization. And I think we're quite good at that. I think we have one of the best pricing experts in the space, who's extremely knowledgeable and has a lot of experience that runs that team. But there's another side of it, how it kind of couples and dovetails with social, right? If we're able to produce and put out really engaging, high quality content and work with collaborators to drive more direct bookings, that maximizes revenue as well, right? And we're able to jack prices up before we have a big influencer. We can kind of play with prices in that way in order to help maximize revenue. When most people talk about revenue management, I think they're talking about pricing optimization. People within the hotel and STR industry, that's normally what it is. So yeah, that's how I would explain what revenue management is and pricing optimization.
Yeah, and so we've talked about revenue management, we've talked about marketing, we've talked about how unique your structures are and how it's employee light and everything like that. I'm going to ask you a difficult question now that's probably impossible to answer, but I'm going to make sure you give one answer. If you could pinpoint one reason why Onera is capable of attracting such high daily rates and such high occupancy rates, what would that be?
So we really tried to go all in, and I'm continuing to try to go all in on this one-of-one concept, right? We want to be one-of-one in our market. We want to, what we call internally, override the comp set. We want to be such an amazing experience and unique stay that you've never seen before, so that you're not comparing us to other stay options in Fredericksburg. You're coming because we're offering something that nobody else is in the market. So it's really the commitment and continued sort of progression of that goal, continually trying to improve and iterate. And related to that is listening to our customers, right? What do our customers want? What gets them excited? What makes them say, wow? What inspires them? What amenities do they want? They'll tell you in reviews, they'll tell you hopefully before reviews if it's, a critique, but in reviews, they'll tell you what they love. So do more of that. So it's really this commitment to one-of-one and listening to the customer to figure out what they really want to make yourself one-of-one.
Amazing. And, everything we've talked about so far is about how you've come up with these great ideas and implemented them brilliantly. But I'm sure it's not been all smooth sailing. I know you've always got high nighty rates and high occupancy rates, but I imagine there's some things that if you were to do again, you'd do differently, and lessons you've learned along the way. So has there been a particular, mistake or decision that you can recall that you probably either, well, you maybe don't regret it because you probably learned something from it, but that if you were to go back again, you'd do it differently?
That we didn't build more right away. No,
I mean, it's an answer.
No, it's funny. I mean, that's, the first time Jesse, who runs our revenue management, actually, the first time he was on site, he's like, your biggest mistake is you didn't go bigger. And since then, we've really leveled up and gone bigger. And I don't think that's true, because there was a lot of learnings along the way, and it was helpful to do something a little smaller scale, because look, during development, we had issues with the budget. It was one of our first development projects, so it ended up costing a lot more than we thought it was going to, et cetera, et cetera. So there was a lot of learnings that, if it was a much bigger scale, could have buried us. So I think it was the right size for what the stage that we were at. And if I had to pinpoint one thing, it was during the development phase, and it revolves around this idea of not skimping. So I no longer skimp. And for many points in my career, I tried to cut corners and skimp and go the cheap route. And I'm unwilling to do that anymore, in part because of this very hard lesson that I had to learn during development. We sourced a bunch of our structures from China, and through a manufacturer that we loosely knew. We didn't have a ton of boots on the ground there to really vet what we were getting. And it ended up costing us a ton of money in time. It probably delayed us 2 months. I mean, this was during COVID, when there was massive problems trying to import, and shipping was having a ton of issues. So we dealt with that, both increased cost and increased time of shipping and tariffs and all the rest. And then once we finally got the products, the instructions were terrible. It was missing parts. Stuff didn't fit together correctly. So the firm that I had hired to do all the construction had to spend a ton of extra time retrofitting and modifying and all the rest to get the product to the level of what my vision was. So yeah, if I could do it all, I think we ended up probably spending more money, at least as much as we would have if we sourced locally. And then, down the road, when we have to replace a tent or this, that, the other thing, it's that much harder because our supplier is overseas. And like I said, we were delayed. So that was probably my biggest mistake along the development path. And it was something that I was a little unsure of, and I kind of got persuaded to do it, and I wish I didn't.
Yeah, and that lesson, I'm sure, has been learned, and the learnings will be applied for future endeavors, which obviously you've got something incredible going on here, but I'm pretty sure you're not going to stop just now. So you've had some news fairly recently that you've received investment from Summit Hotel Properties. So I'd love for you to tell me a little bit more about how that came about, what they're providing, and then what your future plans are, both with them and without them.
Yeah, so they are a fantastic partner of ours, and became interested in what we were doing before we even opened Onera. I mean, we were talking to them months before we even opened, and they were interested in buying us even pre-open. I think we got a bit of a better deal because we waited, right? We waited until we had some history to show for, and that gave us a little more bargaining power. And they actually had a mandate from their board to get into this alternative hospitality space. And they had talked to a number of groups, and, they really liked us, me and my co-founder, John, they really liked us. He actually knew the CFO over at Summit. So that was a warm intro, and they thought we really understood this space. And I think that honestly, their C-suite was personally excited by the units that we had. They were guys that made a good amount of money a year and had quite a bit of disposable income, and it seemed like they were excited to be staying at Onera. So I really do think that helped us. Mm-hmm. And the ongoing partnership with them, they bought a majority interest in Onera Fredericksburg. We retained the management contract. So my company, manages Onera Fredericksburg still, and we are doing another development, even bigger scale. I think going to be more incredible in Wimberley, another Texas Hill Country town. It's going to be 28 units, a beautiful event space with a infinity edge pool, with these incredible views for miles, like hundreds of miles, and west facing. So you get these killer sunsets, and we're going to have spyglass-like units kind of popping out from the hillside, and these greenhouse style units with vegetated roof decks all along the front with these all with these just killer views, private hot tubs, really, really amazing experience. So that's a $22 million development that honestly we couldn't have gotten the financing for without Summit. So they helped, they provided some credit enhancement for us, which we had to pay for, but it was still vital to have that. So we got a senior loan from a bank, and we also got mezzanine financing from Summit. So that's essentially a junior loan, right, to the senior loan that allowed us to take on this, amazing $22 million project that we're building now. We're also doing an expansion to Onera Fredericksburg. So we're going from 11 keys to 34. So we're building 23 additional. And we have some very exciting units that we're going to be bringing to market there. And Summit is a full JV equity partner in that project, right? Because they're a majority owner in Onera Fredericksburg, the first tract, and that kind of came as a package deal. So we're doing that one together with them.
And will you be expanding beyond Texas eventually?
We will, and we have some other projects in the works in other markets. And yeah, I mean, it's exciting to see the growth of Onera and the brand. I also plan to build other types of properties and unique stays. We already have some. We haven't talked about it, but we have a boutique hotel in Palm Springs called Spirit of Sophia. That's a group stay, sort of celebration style villa, if you will. So there's 23 rooms total, and it can be split between 11 bedrooms and 12 bedrooms, and each of those sides is fully private. So we host a lot of, bachelorette parties and intimate weddings and corporate retreats and things like that. So it's another unique stay concept. We went super vibey, Instagrammable, fun colors, a bunch of unique amenities. And, we want to do more products like that as well. So we're going to expand beyond just the Onera brand. And we have a management company set up, as you know, that can do the revenue management, the social media management, as well as design, development, and construction consulting for unique stays. And that company is called Oasi, OASI. And it's, it helps manage the Onera properties, Spirit of Sophia, and other unique stays as well.
Yeah, and we may have some news about that at some point in the next few months. I won't give away too much to the audience, but we may have some news on some potential collaboration with that as well. Now, we asked this question, the final question, to every glamping or outdoor hospitality operator who comes on the podcast. It's kind of getting a bit ridiculous now because the answer is the same every time. But the final question I would ask to you, Ben, is are you happy with your decision to start this business?
So I think happy is a massive understatement, right? I think it was probably I know it was the best decision of my professional career to get into this endeavor. And honestly, before building Onera, I liked what I did for work, and there were aspects of it that were fun, but I do not feel like I found my love and passion for work and what I do and true vision until I got into the glamping or landscape hotel business, if you will. It's just really incredible. I think the type of product and experience that we can bring to people around the world, hopefully someday. So amazing. So thank you, Ben, for giving up your time. I know you're a very busy guy, so really appreciate it. If people either want to book a stay at Onera, or I know you post lots of great content on LinkedIn and on Twitter as well for prospective operators, how do they book a stay, and how do they follow and get in touch with you? Yep. So you can go to our website, stayonera.com, STAYONERA.com. Go right up to book now. You can also follow Onera on Instagram. I think we put out a bunch of great content. You can get a sense for our social media capabilities there. That's just at StayOnera, spelled the same way, on Instagram. And for me personally, I am at Unique Stays Guy on Twitter, so you can find me there. Feel free to follow me if you like this content and want to hear more stuff like this. And also feel free to shoot me a DM if you think there's a way that we might be able to work together. You have an interesting project or might be interested in working with Oasi in some capacity. And then I also post a lot on LinkedIn. So you can find me, Ben Wolff, Onera. If you just search that, you'll find me on LinkedIn.
Amazing, amazing. Well, thank you again, Ben. I'm sure we'll have you back on at some point when you're dominating the market for landscape hotels, not glamping. Thank you again. I think there's some great value in this episode, particularly those who want to go a little bit bigger and maybe implement some of those employee-like practices as well. So thank you again, we'll speak to you soon.
Awesome. Thanks, Nick. Appreciate it.